Three things happened in the last 72 hours that the Pentagon has no answer for none.0. And by the time you finish watching this video, you'll understand why every analyst in Washington is quietly panicking while officially smiling for the cameras. Fact 1. China and Iran signed a joint maritime security framework that places Iranian naval forces and Chinese warships under a single coordinated command structure for the entire Persian Gulf. Fact 2. Iran officially closed 3 key navigation lanes inside the Strait of Hormuz to any vessel not pre-cleared by what they are, now calling the Joint Verification Authority a body that does not include a single American representative. Fact 3. The first non-Chinese tanker, a South Korean vessel carrying liquefied natural gas, just paid a transit fee in Chinese yuan to cross the strait. South Korea, America's treaty ally, paying Beijing to use a waterway that American sailors have died protecting for 40 years. 3 facts, 3 countries, 1 picture, and that picture tells you something the White House will never say out loud. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer an international waterway. It has been quietly annexed, not by armies, not by missiles, by paperwork, by Yuan, and by a phone call between Beijing and Tehran that Washington was never invited to. Trump didn't lose the Strait of Hormuz in a battle. He lost it in a contract. And tonight, I'm going to walk you through exactly how it happened, why it cannot be reversed, and what it means for every American who fills up their car next month. Now, most people watching this story right now are getting it completely wrong. They're focused on the headlines, the tanker, the signing ceremony, the currency story. All of that is real. All of that matters, but none of that is the actual story. The actual story is the architecture. Because here's what nobody on cable news will tell you. Tonight, these 3 things did not just happen. They were built brick by brick, meeting by meeting, contract by contract over the last 18 months, while America was busy debating tariffs and election cycles. China and Iran were quietly constructing a parallel governance system for one of the most important waterways on Earth. And this week, they flipped the switch. Let me say that again. So it lands. The Strait of Hormuz now has 2 governments. The official one, where American warships still patrol and pretend everything is normal. And the operational one, where China and Iran decide who passes, who pays, and in what currency. And the operational one is the one that actually matters. Because in geopolitics, paperwork beats firepower every single time. Always has, always will. And that is exactly what we are watching unfold in real time. So stick with me through the next 12 minutes, because by the end of this video, you are going to see the world map differently. I promise you that. Let me start with the maritime framework, because this is the foundation. Everything else sits on paper. It's a simple agreement. 11 pages, signed in Beijing, co-signed in Tehran. Boring title, something like Joint Persian Gulf Navigation and Security Cooperation Protocol. Sounds like an accounting document. It is not. It is the most consequential maritime agreement signed anywhere on Earth in the last 20 years. Here's why. Articles say of that framework, and this is the part that almost nobody is reading, gives Iran and China joint authority to inspect, delay, or deny passage to any commercial vessel transiting the strait, based on what the agreement calls regional security considerations. That phrase, regional security considerations, is not defined anywhere in the document, which means It means whatever China and Iran decide it means on any given Tuesday. Now think about what that does to global shipping. 20% of the world's oil, that's 20 million barrels a day, passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Every drop of it now passes through a checkpoint controlled by two countries that both have explicit strategic reasons to use that checkpoint as leverage against the United States whenever they want, for whatever reason they want, with a legal framework that says they're allowed to. And here's the part that should make every American sit up straight. The framework has no expiration date. There is no sunset clause. There is no review mechanism. There is no exit option for any third country. It is permanent. Beijing knew exactly what it was doing when it drafted that. This is not a negotiating position. This is a finished structure. But here's where it gets really uncomfortable, because the framework is just the skeleton. The body is what came next. And what came next is something that if you had told a Pentagon planner about it 5 years ago, they would have laughed you out of the room. Wait until you hear what Iran did 3 days after that signing. 3 days after, Beijing, Iran walks into the International Maritime Organization and files a formal navigational notice. Not a threat, not a warning, a notice. 3 navigation lanes inside the Strait of Hormuz are now restricted. Any vessel wanting to use those lanes must be pre-approved by the Joint Verification Authority. That's the new China-Iran body created by the framework I just walked you through. Vessels not pre-approved must use the alternative lane, which Iran has helpfully marked on the new charts. The alternative lane is narrower but slower, and right next to Iranian shore-based missile batteries. Read between the lines on that one. The message is not subtle. You can pass through Hormuz anytime you want. You just have to choose. Get pre-approved by Beijing and Tehran, or sail down the lane where every Iranian missile battery has line of sight on your ship. Either way, the choice is no longer yours. The choice belongs to the Joint Verification Authority. And here's what nobody is saying out loud. The American Navy cannot do anything about this. Legally, the strait sits inside Iranian territorial waters for most of its length. The principle of innocent passage applies under international law. But innocent passage is exactly what Iran is now redefining. They are not blocking ships. They are channeling them. And channeling is legal. Blocking is not. Iran's lawyers trained in Beijing knew the exact line to walk and walked it perfectly. So now think about what an American carrier strike group commander does the next time he wants to project force into the Persian Gulf. He sails down the narrow lane, watched by Iranian missiles, or he requests pre-approval from a body that includes the Chinese Navy. Either option is humiliating. Both options were designed to be humiliating. That is the entire point. And just when you think it cannot get worse for Washington, the third domino falls. And this one is the moment historians will point to 50 years from now and say, that's when the dollar lost the Persian Gulf. Stay with me. A South Korean LNG tanker owned by a Korean shipping company, insured by a Korean insurance firm, crewed by Korean sailors, flying the South Korean flag. And South Korea, let me remind you, is one of America's most important treaty allies in Asia. There are 28,000 American troops stationed on South Korean soil right now. South Korea is inside the American security umbrella as deeply as any country on earth. That tanker just paid Iran in Chinese yuan to cross the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is not a rogue state doing this. This is not a sanctioned state doing this. This is not even a country trying to make a political point. This is one of America's closest allies making a routine commercial decision. And the routine commercial decision is to bypass the dollar. Here's why that matters more than the tanker itself. For 50 years, the global oil trade has been denominated in American dollars. That arrangement, the petrodollar, is one of the most important structural foundations of American power. Every country on earth needs dollars to buy energy, which means every country on earth has to keep dollar reserves, which means American debt is always in demand, which means the United States can borrow at lower rates than anyone else and run deficits that would crush any other country. That privilege is worth trillions of dollars to America every single year. And it just sprung a leak, not a hypothetical leak, a real one, a South Korean leak. Because if South Korea will pay in Yuan, Japan will pay in Yuan. If Japan will pay in Yuan, Saudi Arabia is already considering it. If Saudi Arabia goes the petrodollar system that has held up American economic dominance since Yatsin Gaobak Chasupse starts to dissolve, not in one dramatic collapse, in 1,000 small transactions, each one normalizing the next one. Each one a tiny crack in a dam that took half a century to build. Now 3 separate stories, 1 framework, 1 closed lane, 1 tanker. Easy to dismiss them as unrelated. But here's where I show you why they are not unrelated at all. They are 3 sides of the same structure. Watch what happens when I put them together. Imagine you own a toll booth on the only road into a city. For decades, that toll booth has belonged to you. You collect the toll. You decide who passes. You set the price. The whole world has to come through your toll booth to do business with the city. That toll booth is the source of your power, your wealth, and your global influence. Now, imagine that one day, 2 of your neighbors quietly build a new toll booth right next to yours. They paint it, they staff it, they print their own tickets, they set their own prices, and one by one, the cars start choosing their booth instead of yours. Not because they hate you, because the new booth is faster, cheaper, and the line is shorter. Your toll booth is still standing, the road still passes through it. You can still collect the toll from anyone who chooses to stop. But fewer and fewer cars are stopping. And one morning you wake up and realize that the toll booth you've owned for 40 years is now empty, not destroyed, not blockaded, just irrelevant. That is exactly what just happened to America in the Strait of Hormuz. The American Navy is still there. The carrier strike groups are still there. The treaties are still there. The protection America has provided to Gulf shipping for 40 years is still officially on offer. But the cause have started using a different toll booth. And the new toll booth is run by Beijing and Tehran. And every single transaction that passes through it weakens the foundation of American power without firing a single bullet. So the question now is not what happened next. The question is what happens next. And the next 90 days are going to determine whether America still has a role in the Persian Gulf, in Leung Qinling Samsup, or whether we are watching the formal end of an era.3 scenarios. Let me give them to you straight. Scenario 1, America negotiates. Trump picks up the phone, calls Beijing, and accepts that the old order is gone. He works out a new framework where America gets a seat at the Joint Verification Authority in exchange for tariff relief and a nuclear deal with Iran. This is the scenario where America loses, but loses gracefully. Pride takes a hit, the dollar takes a hit, but the alliance system stays mostly intact. This is the scenario the structural logic supports, and it's the scenario that Beijing has been quietly engineering since the framework was first drafted. Scenario 2, America escalates. Trump responds the way he has always responded to losing by raising the stakes. New tariffs on China, new sanctions on Korean banks that process the Yuan transaction. Maybe even a freedom of navigation operation that pushes a destroyer through the restricted lanes without pre-approval. Each of those moves is available. None of them as costless tariffs hurt American consumers. Sanctions on Korean banks. Alienate America's most important Asian ally. A destroyer in the restricted lane risks an incident with Iranian missile batteries that the American public has zero appetite for. Escalation is possible, but escalation has a ceiling, and Beijing has spent 18 months mapping exactly where that ceiling is. Scenario 3, and this is the one that should keep policy planners up at night. Nothing happens. America does not negotiate. America does not escalate. America just slowly adjusts to the new reality, the way Britain slowly adjusted after Suez in 1950. The framework becomes permanent. The Yuan transactions become routine. The closed lanes become normal. And 5 years from now, the Strait of Hormuz is functionally a Chinese-Iranian condominium with American ships. Welcome to visit, but not welcome to lead. This is the scenario where America does not lose in any single dramatic moment. America just stops being the country that runs the Persian Gulf. And one morning, everyone wakes up and notices the change has already happened. I'll tell you which scenario I think is most likely. Number 3, because that is exactly what Beijing has been preparing for. They did not build this architecture to provoke a war. They built it to make American leadership of the Persian Gulf optional. And once leadership is optional, leadership is finished. Here's where I stand, and I'll say it plainly. China and Iran did not just outmaneuver Trump this week. They locked the door on the Persian Gulf and changed the locks. Not with bombs, not with missiles, with a framework, with a navigation notice, and with a single Korean tanker paying in yuan. The strait is theirs now, not formally, not by any treaty Washington will ever sign functionally, commercially, financially, strategically. The strait is theirs. And the most painful part for Washington is this: there is no battle to lose because there was no battle. The fight was over before the Pentagon even realized a fight was happening. America showed up to defend a choke point that had already been replaced by a different choke point in a different currency under a different flag. Trump is not going to fix this with a tweet. He's not going to fix this with a tariff. He's not going to fix this with a carrier strike group. The architecture is already built. The system is already running. The only question left is whether America negotiates a graceful retreat or an ungraceful one. So here is what I want from you. In the comments below, tell me which scenario you think happens next. Negotiation, escalation, or quiet collapse. Because the answer to that question defines whether your kids grow up in an American century or a Chinese one. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next 90 days are going to reshape the global order. And I'll be here breaking down every move as it happens. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never mistake the warship for the strategy.